This is a video for MEI Core Pure Mathematics, Polar Coordinates 1.1 Polar Coordinates. Let's look at a normal graph. To describe the position of a point on this graph, I'd use Cartesian coordinates, x and y, the lengths on horizontal and vertical axes respectively. This point here, for instance, could be described by the coordinates 3, 2. However, there are other ways of defining the position of a point. I could use this line here, which has an angle with the positive x-axis, let's call that theta, and a length, let's call that r. And these two things together we call polar coordinates, defining the position of a fixed point P in terms of angle and distance. Okay, so this is a graph in polar coordinate space. We need two things. We need this point here, which we call the pole, that's the center of the graph, and we need an initial direction, which is this line here, and we conventionally use the positive x direction, a line horizontally to the right from the pole. And that line is called the initial line. If we look at this point P, it has a distance of 2, 3, 4, 5 units out, and an angle, well, it's two of these sections of the graph. 3 of them make a right angle, so each is 30 degrees. But in polar coordinates, we use radians rather than degrees, so each of these is pi by 6. So this is pi by 3 around from the initial line. And again, we count anti-clockwise as being positive and clockwise as being negative. So this direction is positive and this direction is negative for our angles. So let's have a look at these points here. Let's think about this point being the point A, this being the point B, and this being the point C. Point A is on a radius that goes out on pi by 2. So here is pi by 2, 1, 2, 3 around in the positive direction, and it's 3 units out, so it's going to be here. So 5 pi by 6, well, that's going to be 3 pi by 6, 4, 5 pi by 6 is going to be over here, and it's 5 units out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's B. And finally C, 2 minus pi by 3. Remember we said that this direction was positive and this direction was negative. So minus pi by 3 is going to be 2 sections round, 1, 2 in this direction, so this is minus pi by 3. And it's 2 units out, so it'll be there. It's worth noting that this minus pi by 3 could also be a positive value that goes right the way round to here. And in this case, that would be plus 5 pi by 3, 10 sections, 10 pi by 6. In later videos, we'll look at plotting curves in polar space, and we'll find out that for some curves, it is actually much easier to define and plot them in polar coordinates than it is using ordinary Cartesian coordinates. The next video in this sequence is 1.2, Sketching Polar Curves.